going to learn about ramen because it's delicious. I wanted to learn about ramen. There's no other reason. But in honor of that, today's trivia question is going to be noodle based. So here we go. What Disney movie had a famous scene that involved two dogs and a plate of noodles? Be the first to comment correctly, get pinned to the top. Now let's learn about ramen. Ramen is a Japanese noodle soup. It consists of Chinese-style wheat noodles served in a meat or occasionally fish-based broth, often flavored with soy sauce or miso, and uses toppings such as sliced pork, nori, menma, and scallions. Nearly every region in Japan has its own variation of ramen, such as the Tonkatsu pork bone broth ramen of Kyushu and the Miso Ramen of Hokkaido. Mazemen is a ramen dish that is not served in soup, but rather with a sauce known as a tare. The history, starting with etymology. I'm sure this will be fun. The word ramen is a Japanese borrowing of the Mandarin Chinese yamian, pulled noodles. In 1910, the first ramen shop named Reireiken opened at Asakusa, Tokyo, where the Japanese owner employed 12 Cantonese cooks from Yokohama's Chinatown and served the ramen arranged for Japanese customers. Until the 1950s, ramen was called Shina soba, literally Chinese soba. Today, chuka soba, also meaning Chinese soba or just ramen, are more common, as the word Shina, meaning China, has acquired a pejorative connotation. The origin. Ramen is a Japanese adaptation of Chinese wheat noodles. One theory says that ramen was introduced to Japan during the 1660s by the Chinese Neo-Confucian scholar Zhu Xunsui, who served as an advisor to Tokugawa Mitsukuni after he became a refugee in Japan to escape Manchu rule, and Mitsukuni became the first Japanese person to eat ramen. Most historians reject this theory as a myth created by the Japanese to embellish the origins of ramen. According to historians, the more plausible theory is that the ramen was introduced to Japan in the late 19th or early 20th century by Chinese immigrants living in the Yokohaman Chinatown. According to the record of the Yokohama Ramen Museum, ramen originated in China and made its way to Japan in 1859. Early versions were wheat noodles in broth topped with Chinese-style roast pork. By 1900, restaurants serving Chinese cuisine from Canton and Shanghai offered a simple dish of noodles cut rather than hand-pulled, a few toppings, and a broth flavored with salt and pork bones. Many Chinese living in Japan also pulled portable food stalls selling ramen and gyoza dumplings to workers. By the mid-1900s, these stalls used a type of a musical horn called a charumera, from the Portuguese charamela, to advertise their presence, a practice some vendors still retain via a loudspeaker and a looped recording. By the early Showa period, ramen had become a popular dish when eating out. According to ramen expert Hiroshi Osaki, the first specialized ramen shop opened in Yokohama in 1910. Post-war popularization. After Japan's defeat in World War II, the American military occupied the country from 1945 to 1952. In December 45, Japan recorded its worst rice harvest in 42 years, which caused food shortages as Japan had drastically reduced rice production during the war as production shifted to colonies in China and Taiwan. The U.S. flooded the market with cheap wheat flour to deal with food shortages. From 1948 to 50 784 tons. But wheat also found its way into ramen, which most Japanese ate at black market food vendors to survive, as the government food distribution system ran about 20 days behind schedule. Although the Americans maintained Japan's wartime ban on outdoor food vending, flour was secretly diverted from commercial mills into the black markets, where nearly 90% of stalls were under the control of gangsters, locally referred to as Yakuza, who extorted vendors for protection money. Thousands of ramen vendors were arrested during the occupation. In the same period, millions of Japanese troops returned from China and continental East Asia from their posts in the Second Sino-Japanese War. Some of them would have been familiar with wheat noodles. By 1950, wheat flour exchange controls were removed and restrictions on food vending loosened, which further boosted the number of ramen vendors. Private companies even rented out yatai starter kits consisting of noodles, toppings, bowls, and chopsticks. Ramen yatai provided a rare opportunity for small-scale post-war entrepreneurship. The Americans also aggressively advertised nutritional benefits of wheat and animal protein. The combination of these factors caused wheat noodles to gain prominence in Japan's rice-based culture. Gradually, ramen became associated with urban life. The modern period. In 1958, instant noodles were invented by Momofuku Ando, the Taiwanese-Japanese founder and chairman of Nissin Foods. Named the greatest Japanese invention of the 20th century in a Japanese poll, instant ramen allowed anyone to make an approximation of this dish simply by adding boiling water. Beginning in the 1980s, ramen became a Japanese cultural icon and was studied around the world. At the same time, local varieties of ramen were hitting the national market and could even be ordered by their regional names. A ramen museum opened in Yokohama in '94. Today, ramen is one of Japan's most popular foods, with Tokyo alone containing around 5,000 ramen shops and more than 24,000 ramen shops across Japan. Tsuta, a ramen restaurant in Tokyo's Sugamo district, received a Michelin star in December 2015. Ramen restaurants were particularly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic in Japan, with 34 chains filing for bankruptcy by September 2020. Ramen restaurants are typically narrow and seat customers closely, making social distancing difficult. Types. A wide variety of ramen exists in Japan, with geographical and vendor-specific differences even in varieties that share the same name. Although ramen usually has toppings, ramen can be broadly categorized by its two main ingredients, noodles and broth. Noodles. Most noodles are made from four basic ingredients: wheat flour, salt, water, and kansui. From kansui, alkaline water, a type of alkaline mineral water containing sodium carbonate and usually potassium carbonate, as well as sometimes a small amount of phosphoric acid. Although ramen noodles and udon noodles are both made with wheat and are similar, they are different kinds of noodle. The kansui is the distinguishing ingredient in ramen noodles and originated in Inner Mongolia, where some lakes contain large amounts of these minerals and whose water is said to be perfect for making these noodles. Making noodles with kansui lends them a yellowish hue as well as a firm texture. Eggs may also be substituted for kansui. Some noodles are made with neither eggs nor kansui and should only be used for yakisoba, as they have a weaker structure and are more prone to soaking up moisture and becoming extremely soft when served in soup. Ramen comes in various shapes and lengths. It may be thick, thin or even ribbon-like, as well as straight or wrinkled. Traditionally, ramen noodles were made by hand, but with growing popularity, many ramen restaurants prefer to use noodle-making machines to meet the increased demand and improved quality. Automatic ramen-making machines imitating manual production methods have been available since the mid-20th century, produced by such Japanese manufacturers as Yamato Manufacturing and others. Soup. Ramen soup is generally made from stock based on chicken pork, combined with a variety of ingredients such as pork bones, katsubushi, skipjack tuna flakes, niboshi, dried baby sardines, beef bones, shiitake, onions, and kombu, kelp. Some modern ramen broths can also be vegetable-based. Tare is often added to broth to make the soup. Tonkatsu, pork bone soup, is broth with a typically translucent white-colored appearance. Similar to the Chinese beitang, it has a thick broth made from boiling pork bones, fat, and collagen over high heat for many hours, which suffuses the broth with a hearty pork flavor and a creamy consistency that rivals milk, melted butter, or gravy, depending on the soup. Although tonkatsu is merely a kind of broth, some people consider Tonkatsu Ramen, specialty of Kyushu, its birthplace, a distinct flavor category. Torigara, or chicken bone soup, based on chicken bone broth, originated mainly in Tokyo. It is often used as a base for salt and shoyu ramen. Flavors. The resulting combination is generally divided into several categories, although newer and older variations often make this categorization less clear-cut. A description of said old variations are as follows. Shoyu ramen has a clear brown broth based on a chicken and vegetable or sometimes fish or beef stock with plenty of soy sauce added, resulting in a soup that is tangy, salty, and savory, yet still fairly light on the palate. Shoyu ramen usually has curly noodles rather than straight ones, although this is not always the case. It is often adorned with marinated bamboo shoots or menma, scallions, ninjin, carrot, kamaboko, fish cakes, nori, seaweed, boiled eggs, bean sprouts, or black pepper. Occasionally, the soup will also contain chili oil or Chinese spices, and some shops serve the sliced beef instead of the usual chashu. Shio, or salt ramen, is the oldest of the four types. It has a pale, clear, yellowish broth made with plenty of salt and any combination of chicken, vegetables, fish, and seaweed. Occasionally, pork bones are also used, but they are not boiled as long as they are for tonkatsu ramen, so the soup remains light and clear. Chashu is sometimes swapped for lean chicken, meatballs, and pickled plums, and kamaboko, a slice of processed fish roll, sometimes served as a frilly white circle with a pink or red spiral called Naruto maki, are popular toppings as well. Noodle texture and thickness varies among shio ramen, but they are usually straight rather than curly. Hakodate ramen is a well-known version of shio ramen in Japan. Miso ramen is a relative newcomer, having reached national prominence around 1965. This uniquely Japanese ramen, which was developed in Sapporo, Hokkaido, features a broth that combines copious miso and is blended with oily chicken or fish broth, and sometimes with tonkatsu or lard to create a thick, nutty, slightly sweet, and very hearty soup. Miso ramen broth tends to have a robust, tangy flavor, so it stands up to a variety of flavorful toppings: spicy bean paste or tobanjan, butter and corn, leeks, onions, bean sprouts, ground pork, cabbage, sesame seeds, white pepper, and chopped garlic are common. The noodles are typically thick, curly, and slightly chewy. Kare soup is thought that it was born spontaneously relatively recently in Japan. In Japan, several cities claim to be its place of origin. The city of Muroran claims it originated there in 1965, while the city of Sanjo City claims to have had curry ramen for over 80 years, and the city of Katori also claims to have been the site of its origin. Curry soup is mainly made with pork bones and vegetables and is seasoned with curry. The noodles are thick and curly. Toppings include chashu, wakame, and bean sprouts. Toppings. After basic preparation, ramen can be seasoned and flavored with any number of toppings, including, but not limited to, the following. Chashu, sliced barbecued or braised pork. Negi, green onion. Takanazuke, pickled and seasoned mustard leaves. Seasoned, usually salted boiled egg, soy egg, bean or other sprouts. Menma, lactate fermented bamboo shoots. Kakoni, braised pork cubes or squares. Kikurage, wood ear mushroom. Nori, dried seaweed. Kamaboko, formed fish paste, often in a pink and white spiral called Naruto maki. Squid, umeboshi, pickled plum. Corn, butter, wakame, a type of seaweed, olive oil, sesame oil, soy sauce, other types of vegetables. Preference. Seasonings commonly added to ramen are white pepper, black pepper, butter, chili pepper, sesame seeds, and crushed garlic. Soup recipes and methods of preparation tend to be closely guarded secrets. Most tonkatsu ramen restaurants offer a system known as kaedama, where customers who have finished their noodles can request a refill for a few hundred yen more to be put into their remaining soup. Regional variations. While standard versions of ramen are available throughout Japan since the Taisho period, the last few decades have shown a proliferation of regional variations. Some of these which have gone on to national prominence are Sapporo, the capital of Hokkaido, is especially famous for its ramen. Most people in Japan associate Sapporo with its rich Miso Ramen, which was invented there and which is ideal for Hokkaido's harsh, snowy winters. Sapporo Miso Ramen is typically topped with sweet corn, butter, bean sprouts, finely chopped pork, and garlic, and sometimes local seafood such as scallop, squid, and crab. Hakodate, another city of Hokkaido, is famous for its salt-flavored ramen, while Ashikawa in the north of the island offers a soy sauce-flavored variation. In Muroran, many ramen restaurants offer Muroran curry ramen. Kitakata ramen is known for its rather thick, flat, curly noodles served in a pork and niboshi broth. The area within the former city limits has the highest per capita number of ramen establishments. Ramen has such prominence in the region that locally the word soba usually refers to ramen and not to actual soba, which is referred to as Nihon soba or Japanese soba. Tokyo-style ramen consists of slightly thin, curly noodles served in a soy-flavored chicken broth. The Tokyo-style broth typically has a touch of dashi, as old ramen establishments in Tokyo often originate from soba eateries. Standard toppings are chopped scallion, menma, sliced pork, kamaboko, egg, nori, and spinach. Ikebukuro, Ogikubo, and Ebisu are three areas in Tokyo known for their ramen. Yokohama ramen specialty is called lake. It consists of thick, straight-ish noodles served in a soy-flavored pork broth similar to tonkatsu, sometimes referred to as tonkatsu shoyu. The standard toppings are roasted pork, chashu, boiled spinach, sheets of nori, often with shredded Welsh onion, negi, and a soft or hard-boiled egg. It is traditional for customers to call the softness of the noodles the richness of the broth and the amount of oil they want. Wakayama Ramen in the Kansai Kansai region has a broth made from soy sauce and pork bones. Hakata Ramen originates from Hakata district of Fukuoka City in Kyushu. It has a rich, milky pork brown tonkatsu broth and rather thin, non-curly and resilient noodles. Often distinctive toppings such as crushed garlic, beni shoga, pickled ginger, sesame seeds, and spicy pickled mustard greens, karashi takana, are left on tables for customers to serve themselves. Ramen stalls in Hakata and Tenjin are well known within Japan. Recent trends have made Hakata Ramen one of the most popular types in Japan, and several chain restaurants specializing in Hakata Ramen can be found all over the country. Tofu Ramen is a specialty of Iwatsuku Ward in Saitama City. And all of these delicious ramen pictures are here. I'll move over, and to the left, I'll read off what they are. You've got a Tokyo-style ramen, Kitakata Ramen, Hakata Ramen with tonkatsu soup, a Wakayama Ramen, right there, Tsukemon dripping ramen, Abura Sobu oiled noodles, Takayama Ramen, and Hiyashi chilled ramen. Oh, even more. This is great. Related dishes. There are many related Chinese-influenced noodle dishes in Japan. The following are often served alongside ramen in ramen establishments. They do not include noodle dishes considered traditionally Japanese, such as soba or udon, which are almost never served in the same establishments as ramen. Nagasaki champon. The noodles are thicker than ramen but thinner than udon. Champon is topped with a variety of ingredients, mostly seafood, stir-fried and dressed in a starchy sauce. The stir-fried ingredients are poured directly over the cooked noodles, with the sauce acting as a soup. Tanmen is a mild, usually salty soup served with a mix of sautéed vegetables and seafood pork, not to be confused with the tantanmen. Wonton-men has long, straight noodles and wonton served in a mild, usually salty soup. Tsukemen, dripping noodles. The noodles and soup are served in separate bowls. The diner dips the noodles in the soup before eating. Can be served hot or cold. Tantanmen, Japanese version of dan noodles, itself a Szechuan specialty. Ramen in a reddish, spicy chili and sesame soup, usually containing minced pork garnished with chopped scallion and chili, and occasionally topped with spinach or bok choy. Suratanmen or Sanratanmen, noodles in hot and sour soup, is very similar to Szechuan hot and sour soup, but served with long noodles. The topping ingredients are sautéed, and a thickener is added before the mix is poured on the soup and the noodles. Abura soba or oil noodles. Ramen and toppings served without the soup, but with a small quantity of oily soy-based sauce instead. Hiyashi chuka, chilled Chinese, also known as ramen, especially in Western Japan. A summer dish of chilled ramen on a plate with various toppings, typically thin strips of omelette, ham, cucumber, and tomato, and served with a vinegary soy dressing and karachi, Japanese mustard. It was first produced at the Ryuete, a Chinese restaurant in Sendai. Restaurants in Japan. Ramen is offered in various types of restaurants and locations, including ramen shops, izakaya, drinking establishments, lunch cafeterias, karaoke halls, and amusement parks. Many ramen restaurants only have a counter and a chef. In these shops, the meals are paid for in advance at a ticket machine to streamline the process. However, the best quality ramen is usually only available in specialist ramenya restaurants. Some restaurants also provide halal ramen using chicken in Osaka and Kyoto. As ramen-ya restaurants offer mainly ramen dishes, they tend to lack variety in menu. Besides ramen, some of the dishes generally available in a ramen-ya restaurant include other dishes from Japanese Chinese cuisine, such as fried rice called chahan or yakimeshi, gyoza, Chinese dumplings, and beer. Ramen-ya interiors are often filled with Chinese-inspired decorations. Outside Japan, ramen became popular in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, where it is known as rishi yamyan, Japanese-style yamyan. Restaurant chains serve ramen alongside distinctly Japanese dishes such as tempura and yakitori. Interestingly, in Japan, these dishes are not traditionally served with ramen, but gyoza, karaage, and others from Japanese Chinese cuisine. In Korea, ramen is called ramyeon. There are different varieties, such as kimchi-flavored ramyeon. While usually served with vegetables such as carrots and scallions or eggs, some restaurants serve variations of ramyeon containing additional ingredients such as dumplings, tteok, or cheese as topping. Outside of Asia, particularly in areas with a large demand for Asian cuisine, there are restaurants specializing in Japanese-style foods such as ramen noodles. For example, Wakayama, a UK-based restaurant chain serving Pan-Asian food, serves a ramen noodle soup in the United States and Canada. Jinya Ramen Bar serves Tonkatsu ramen. Instant ramen. Instant ramen noodles were exported from Japan by Nissin Foods starting in 1971, bearing the name Oodles of Noodles. 1 year later, it was rebranded Nissin Cup Noodles, packaging in a foam food container. It is referred to as cup ramen in Japan and subsequently saw a growth in international sales. Over time, the term ramen became used in North America to refer to other instant noodles. While some researchers claim that consuming instant ramen 2 or more times a week increases the likelihood of developing heart disease and other conditions, including diabetes and stroke, especially in women, those claims have not been reproduced, and no study has isolated instant ramen consumption as an aggravating factor. Instant ramen noodles, known to have a serving of 43 grams, consist of very high sodium. At least 1,760 milligrams of sodium are found in one packet alone. It consists of 385 calories, 55.7 grams of carbohydrates, 14.5 grams of total fat, 6.5 grams of saturated fat, 7.9 grams of protein, and 0.6 milligrams of thiamine. A canned version. In Akihabara, vending machines distribute warm ramen in a steel can known as ramen can. It is produced by a popular local ramen restaurant and flavors as tonkatsu and curry and contains noodles, soup, menma, and pork. It is intended as a quick snack and includes a small folded plastic fork. In pop culture, movies. In the 1985 film Tampopo, a truck driver, Goro, helps a woman called Tampopo create the perfect ramen restaurant. Ramen and how it's made was the subject of the 2008 feature film The Ramen Girl, starring Brittany Murphy. Emoji. In October 2010, an emoji was approved for Unicode 6.0 U+1F35C Ramen Bowl Steaming Bowl for Steaming Bowl that depicts Japanese ramen noodles in a bowl of steaming broth with chopsticks. In 2015, the icon was added to Emoji 1.0. Museum. The Shin Yokohama Ramen Museum is a unique museum about ramen in the Shin Yokohama district of Kohoku-ku, Yokohama. And now I'm just hungry. That's the end of the article, obviously. Look at the sea also. I just want to keep reading about it because I love ramen. List of Japanese soups and stews. List of noodle dishes. Ramen dishes. List of soups. Lagam, lo mein, pod noodle, Hawaiian saimin, shirataki noodles, tare sauce, laksa, Southeast Asia, and beef noodles. I want to click on the list of ramen dishes. Why wouldn't that have been included in this? You know what I mean? Notable dish. Oh, that's not that much actually. You know what, we can learn about this a little bit, I think. This is where it's at, buddy boy. Right here. I wanted a list of ramen dishes. I was curious where they were. Here we go, a list of ramen dishes. This is a list of notable ramen dishes. Ramen is a Japanese dish that consists of Chinese-style wheat noodles served in a meat or occasionally fish-based broth, often flavored with soy sauce or miso. Ramen dishes often include toppings such as sliced pork. I read this already, I'm going to do it again. Dried seaweed, fermented bamboo shoots, and green onion. Nearly every region in Japan has its own variation of ramen. Ramen shops are restaurants that specialize in ramen dishes. So, the dishes themselves. Oh no, we did read these already. There was a separate article. Should I do it again? Let me see. Oh, you know what? They're kind of different, I think. Champon, Muroman curry, Tonkatsu. They have Hiyashi Chuka. Did we do that one already? I don't know. I think I'll do it again. Who cares? Maybe you're sleeping. If not, I apologize. I'm just going to repeat the dishes. It'll only take a minute or two if we already read about it. I'm just really hungry and I'm not able to eat ramen for like another 7 hours because no place is open yet. It's like 4:37 a.m. Yes, dude, come on. Of course, what's it called? I'm an insomniac. That's why I make this channel. Yeah, so I'm not going to be able to eat ramen for a really long time. I'm just going to read about it. Ramen dishes, champon. I wonder if I'm saying that correctly. Champon. I'm going to say champon. A ramen dish that is a regional cuisine of Nagasaki, Japan. Different versions exist in Japan, Korea, and China. Champon is made by frying pork, seafood, and vegetables with lard. A soup made with chicken and pig bones is then added. Ramen noodles made especially for champon are added and then boiled. Unlike other ramen dishes, only one pan is needed as the noodles are boiled in the soup. Hakata Ramen, first derived from the Hakata region. It has a rich, milky pork bone, tonkatsu broth, and rather thin, non-curly, and resilient noodles. Hokkaido Ramen. Many cities in Hokkaido have their own version of ramen, and Sapporo Ramen is known throughout Japan. Hiyashi Chuka, a Japanese dish consisting of chilled ramen noodles with various toppings served in the summer. Kagoshima Ramen, a ramen dish offered in the Kagoshima prefecture in southern Japan. It's mainly based on tonkatsu, pork bone broth. It is a little cloudy, and chicken stock, vegetables, dried sardines, kelp, and dried mushrooms are added. Muroran Curry Ramen, a curry-flavored ramen noodle dish that is provided at many ramen restaurants in the cities of Muroran, Doboribetsu, Date, and Toyako in Hokkaido, Japan. Sanra Tenmen, a Japanese hot and sour soup prepared using ramen noodles. Tonkatsu Ramen, a ramen dish that originated on the Kyushu island of Japan. Its broth is based upon pork bones. Tsukemen, a ramen dish in Japan cuisine consisting of noodles that are eaten after being dipped in a separate bowl of soup or broth. I'm so hungry. Okay, I'm going now. There's a really good noodle place called... Come on, I have it on my other channel actually. It's so good. You see it in 4K. I forgot. I'll leave it in the comments. It's a really, really great ramen place. It's just so good. The noodles are like rich, just savory. I like pho also. They're just different, you know, rice noodle versus wheat noodle and everything. I think maybe the fact that the wheat noodle is just heartier, it's made to fill you up a little bit more. Maybe that's why it's more savory. But man, pho is really good. A nice pho ga, chicken pho. That's a great noodle soup. I'll say pho ga and matzo ball soup are my go-tos when I'm sick. And maybe ramen, but I kind of have to be healthy enough to eat the ramen. Does that make sense? I don't care. I just want some tonkatsu. You guys have a good night, and I'll talk to you in the comments. Let me know if there's any food you want me to read about. What do you say about that? I love reading about food for some reason. It's very satisfying to me. It's fun. Okay. Yeah, like I said, talk comments. Bye-bye.